Well, this week saw a batch of climate fossils glue themselves to roads and vandalise buildings in Adelaide, all in the name of Extinction Rebellion. Now, it wasn't lost on me. They did so using products developed by the petroleum industry, which they claim to detest, while they also arrived at their protest destination in their diesel-powered vehicles, which they also claim to detest. Clearly, the term hypocrisy wasn't correctly explained in the New Age dictionary. But that's so true of so many in the outrage and grievance industry. I mean, for example, those hell-bent on liberating animals don't want some animals to actually live because, you see, they produce methane, and methane's bad for the planet. And those advocating to save the planet to preserve humanity also actually see humanity as a cancer on the planet. So they've got to choose one over the other. And even these eco-freaks, they exhale carbon dioxide, which they so profess to hate. Perhaps if they held their breath for long enough, it might save us all a lot of bother and save the planet into the bargain. Hey, it could even become a good slogan, go green by turning blue. But none of this is a problem. If the activists did it all on their own time without disrupting everyone else, they're allowed to have their views, however flawed they might be. Unfortunately, they don't. They interfere with all of us. They destroy businesses, they disrupt lives, and they have scant regard for the law. And who can blame them? And mostly they get a little more than a slap on the wrist and told, come along, don't do it again, you're naughty. Well, one man determined to strengthen the legal sanction available to protect society from these fascists is Senator Alex Antic. He joins me now. Senator Antic, you've proposed some new legislative changes to stop these sorts of eco-freaks from disrupting the rest of our lives. What do you have in mind?
Well, thanks, Corey. Thanks for having me. We're not actually far from the scene of that disruption right now as we sit here. It was on Flinders Street last Wednesday morning, a major street in Adelaide, and a street that was held to ransom by some of these climate peanuts. This was a street that was effectively shut down with people gluing themselves to the streets, 4 of them, I think, jumping up on the roof of Santos, one of our biggest companies here, putting up slogans, cut emissions by 2025. That's 4 years away, just in case you're interested. Your gas is killing us and that sort of stuff. Now, it all seems pretty harmless and innocuous in many ways, but what ended up happening was the MFS turned up, the Metropolitan Fire Service, with cherry pickers to try and get some of these people off the roofs, and even the Star Group, Police Special Weapons and Tactics, as they're known in SA, were brought in to try and bring some of these people off. So it's very, very dangerous. It's very, very disruptive, and frankly, it's very, very childlike. There are many, many state-based offences which potentially were created or made on that day. Things like trespass and property damage and loitering and those sorts of things. But it strikes me that in 2019, the federal government legislated using the telecommunications power to create a new offence of using carriage services, so the internet, telephone services, to prepare and incite these sorts of attacks on farms. They were the so-called vegan terrorist laws. It strikes me that a very similar principle arises here. That is, for the number of people that were actually involved and ultimately charged on the day, there must have been many, many more. It was quite an elaborate stunt, quite an elaborate disruption, if you will. Many, many more who were involved in the preparatory acts here. We need to get serious about trying to take it to some of these protesters. You do not win these battles by being weak, and we need to take it up and try and find some new ways of combating this scourge, because it's only going to get worse.
Alex, you make an important point, and I presume as a legislator, but you also were a practicing lawyer. If you unintentionally commit a crime, there is a penalty attached to that, and the judges and the courts take that into consideration. But your point is that these people are planning this. They're using carriage services to plan to commit an offence. That sounds like conspiracy, whether that's the right word or not. That should be against the law already, isn't it?
Well, there are a lot of things that were potentially against the law in what we saw on Wednesday morning, but there's always the opportunity, I think, to create an extra layer of distraction and an extra layer of disincentive for people to do these sorts of things. We know that these people sometimes go out of their way to actually do this stuff for the purposes of getting arrested. It's great publicity, it's caused a great big stir. what I say is perhaps there should be another layer of offence that created over and above the state level offences that are here. Now, this was created in terms of people preparing and inciting others to storm farms and, release cows or whatever, liberate the chickens, whatever it is. The similar principle arises here. There is the power for the Commonwealth Government to amend the criminal code using the telecommunications power in the Constitution, as I understand it, to create another sort of offence, one which might be more of a deterrent for people that think it's a bit of fun and games on their way to work in the morning. I mean, this is real disruption. It's cost people money. It's potentially cost them harm and that sort of stuff. This is serious business. So I say we need to look into this, and I'll be speaking to the powers that be next week when we return to Canberra about whether or not there's the scope to explore these options.
Yeah, this is a very self-indulgent thing. You made the point about the MFS, the Metropolitan Fire Service, had to be there to get a cherry picker. They had to use dangerous solvents to melt the petroleum-based glue that these eco-terrorists were using. Are state-based laws simply not good enough, or is it a case that they are good enough but the judges aren't holding it up because these people don't care about getting a $100 fine or a $200 fine because they're never sanctioned with a maximum $10,000 fine or more?
Well, I think the state-based laws cover off some of the offences that need to be covered off, but they're very much a broad brush approach. Trespass can be anything from climbing on the roof of the Santos building here to going next door to your neighbour's house when you're not warranted. So what we're talking about is a very specific category of incitement style offences. Many of these are unique to the internet age. 25 years ago, nobody even thought about the prospects of using their email or their social media or whatever it may be. It's more a question, I think, of the law adapting to the current generation of, climate activists, if you will, and how they operate. So we want to be, making a disincentive. This was a huge disruption in Adelaide on Wednesday morning. It's going to continue. We've seen other examples of it against some MPs. My friend and colleague Nicole Flint's office was vandalised several weeks ago as well. So we're going to see this continue, and we can't be weak about it. We've got to be strong.
Yeah, well, Alex, I know from personal experience, when I was in the Senate, my office was invaded by some rainbow terrorists who were taken out of school by their parents, some of them, and they went to court. Basically, nothing happened to any of them, even though they'd vandalised Commonwealth Government property. Let me ask you this. In America, we saw Black Lives Matter, or Black Looters Matter as I call them, go on the rampage virtually without any consequences, defended by Democratic journalists, and yet as soon as some people went into the Congress, they went into the Capitol Hill there, all the politicians got up in arms. Why aren't politicians more up in arms about the invasions of private property, but yet if it happened in Canberra, you reckon they'd be squealing like stuck pigs?
Yeah, I mean, I think we hear all the time, I certainly hear it in Canberra all the time. My friends from the left of politics will tell us all about the dangers of right-wing terrorism as it exists. And of course, the only time we ever actually see, acts of vandalism, acts of public nuisance like this is when it comes from left-wing protesters. So a similar principle arises, as you say, over there in the United States. They spent a summer of burning buildings and looting and rioting, which all went through to the keeper, as you say. And then as soon as one bloke with some bullhorns and some face paint decided that he wanted to, sort of stumble his way into the Capitol Hill building, it was all on for young and old. So, look, there's an entirely apparent hypocrisy there, and I think it's very apparent. I think we need to be real about what we're seeing. We're going to see more from Extinction Rebellion and other type groups, and we've got to be on the front foot.
Yeah. Alex, you've been a powerful voice in this for a long time. I know that there are others in the parliament, particularly some regional MPs that are up in arms about it because of protection for farmers who provide us with our food. Let's not make that point and export, millions and millions of dollars of wealth across the country, which benefits us all. How much support is there in the parliament for taking the steps that you've outlined tonight?
Well, I don't know yet. We haven't gone that far. I mean, really, I think it's a question of exploring whether or not there's an appetite for it. It might be something that even consider a private member's bill about, just subject to how much attention there is. I think there would be a lot, though. I think we do see an increasing and understandable lack of tolerance about some of this behaviour. It's very childlike, I mean, many At times, you as a parent, I'm sure your boys wouldn't behave badly, but I'm sure as a parent, you have the times
they
when
were perfect
when
all the
kids need
time,
to
Alex.
I assume that's true, very much like their father. But children sometimes need discipline. This is childlike behaviour we're seeing out there, and sometimes legislative discipline is the only way to go.
It's a very good point, Alex Antic. Thank you very much. We're happy to have you in the Senate. I appreciate you coming on tonight.
I want to say, Corey, I don't want you to kick me off this. I've glued myself to this chair, and I'm not going anywhere tonight. So forget it.
And he's got a sense of humour too. Alex, it's wonderful. Thank you very much.